I also then got a number of messages from prominent black buddies of mine who said, this is bad behavior by capitalists, by corporate chieftains. And there you are sort of saying capitalism works, capitalism is good. And these look like they're bad people. So, it does look like they've done bad. 6 prominent business people, all white, all known to many of us, and all highly respected, fabricated the acquisition of the Dai Data campus, persuaded the Japanese that the buyers were a BEE group of mainly women. Why it's so sad to me is on a number of levels. It's an abuse of BEE, and I've never been a fan of BEE, but it's a real abuse of BEE by 6 white corporate chieftains. When I know all 6 of them, there's a reason I don't want to mention that. It just saddens me to have read what has happened.
Guys, so Rob Hersov has come under a lot of heat, and he's really sort of like disappointed, because of, just weeks ago, he was really praising capitalism as the way to go for South Africa, in terms of the global changes in the world. But, I think that statement he actually claims that was hit by this incident by this company, Dimension Data, where the CEOs actually reframed BEE, broad-based Black economic empowerment, which many critics actually claim is an instrument for affirmative justice, affirmative action, and the claim to sort of like restore historical injustices in South Africa's history. Now, these capitalists deployed BEE as a basis to defraud a Japanese company, and that has actually totally backfired in what Rob Hersov calls an idiotic move by these guys, because it was sort of like a totally unsophisticated fraud that now has actually sort of like been brought back to him. He's now really under fire, a lot of heat, because of the fact that he's a proponent of capitalism, and now this is kind of like what a really big issue, that the capitalism, especially the greed, that's kind of like, if not well controlled within the domains of capitalism, could actually have a downward spiral in the degeneration of man and society. And this is actually what has hit Dimension Data. So let's listen quickly to how Rob Hersov really slams these CEOs, so to speak, in a really soft way anyway. He's really disappointed with them and Dimension Data. And I'll be back for some really interesting analysis on what really went down and, what's going to be happening to these CEOs and these top white leaders who have been involved in this fraud.
Capitalism generally in this country is on the back foot. This surely it requires some kind of an aggressive response from those who do promote capitalism, like yourself.
100%. If you look at the Eurostar fraud, and I think everyone knows now that Eurostar was defrauding everybody. He not only conned everyone around him, he also conned Christo Wiese, because Christo put a lot of trust in him, believed in him, and lost a fortune as a result. So Christo was honest, decent, and was conned by Marcus Jooste. But Marcus Jooste, the whole Steinhoff case, would have been unbelievably, or is unbelievably difficult for any juror to understand. How do you have a jury getting their heads around what Marcus Jooste did if sophisticated people sitting on the board with Jooste, including Christo and others, couldn't get their heads around it? I mean, how do you ever get your head around that? But this is as clear as the driven snow. If you assume the judgment is correct, which one has to, it's an unsophisticated fraud. It's ridiculous. I mean, what was Nathan, what was he thinking? He was the investment banker. He's a sophisticated corporate financier. And this is just amateur. It's idiotic. Why they did that, I don't know. Crazy.
So what happens next if we are to presume that NTT is as good as its word? Fraud charges being laid against Jeremy Orr, Doc Watson, and co?
All six are going to get charged. And I think this is my reading. Let's just take my view, that there's guilty and very guilty. The 2 guys who were sitting on the board of the seller, Jeremy and Jason Goodall, I think I got those names right, are the very guilty ones, because they were sitting on the board of the seller, advising the seller to sell to a consortium in which they were hidden as two of the buyers. The others were sitting just on the side of the buyers, but they would clearly have known what was going on. And then Steve Nathan was supposed to give independent advice. He was an independent director and a corporate financier. And obviously he was supposed to have got the best price possible, wouldn't you think? And I think there were 2 or 3 other interested bidders, including African Rainbow Capital, Patrice Motsepe's investment company, which has the 2 Johans, Johan van Zyl and Johan van der Merwe there, 2 super sophisticated, intelligent guys, and they like real estate investments. And I believe they were very keen at having a look, but were kind of, dissed off by Steve Nathan. That's what it seems like, because he didn't want the price to go above 1.4 billion. And it was clearly worth a lot more than that. 2 days ago, I got sent this document by 2 friends of mine who said, this has just come out a day ago. You've got to read it. It's like a crime novel. And I've never really read a judgment before, but I started reading it, and it's, I don't know how many pages in it. It's 100 pages or so, 75, and it is a crime novel. I mean, I couldn't put it down. The fact that I do know a number of the people makes it even more pertinent and even sadder to read it. And, why am I being asked about it? I'm not a lawyer. I'm a businessman, is because I also then got a number of messages from friends of mine, including some prominent black buddies of mine who said, aha, Rob, this is bad behavior by capitalists, by corporate chieftains, by people who've been held in such high regard. And there you are sort of saying capitalism works, capitalism is good, and these look like they're bad people. So, it does look like they've done bad. It really does. It's not a good story to be reading about South Africa.
Give it to us in a nutshell. What happened?
It looks like the following has happened. That 6 prominent business people, all white, all known to many of us, and all highly respected, who, some of whom have built Data into one of the great success stories of South African technology and South African business, fabricated the acquisition of the Data campus, which is in Johannesburg, in Bryanston, a data center, a golf club, and a art collection, which was part of the campus, at a ridiculously low price, where the company buying these 4 assets, and I think it ended up only being the campus and the art collection in the end, at this ridiculously low price of 1.4 billion rand, ejecting other potential buyers, including Patrice Motsepe's African Rainbow Capital, which is a real estate buyer, persuaded the Japanese that the buyers were a BEE group of mainly women. At least 51% of the buying group were BEE women. Not true. Buying at a ridiculously low price, where 2 members of the buying party were actually sitting on the board of the selling company, advising them to sell and at what price to sell. So this is fraud, but it's a fraud of the most unsophisticated Keystone Cops variety. I mean, when you read it, you go, I think these people are supposed to be sophisticated, business people, and it's the most amateur fraud ever. I mean, most frauds are sophisticated. This is just done in a way that you think they know the rules. What the hell are they doing? And why it's an affront to me, and it's so sad because some of these people I really have liked. I really admired them and liked them. Why it's so sad to me is on a number of levels. It's an abuse of BEE, and I've never been a fan of BEE, but it's a real abuse of BEE by 6 white corporate chieftains who've always been held in high regard. It's an affront to foreign direct investment. Entity Docomo is one of the biggest companies in the world, and they've been ripped off. So this thing is just dreadful from a number of different angles. It's dreadful. It's dreadful for South Africa. It's dreadful for FDI. It's dreadful for BEE or anti-BEE, from a number of fronts, this really is an embarrassing story.
I notice you have purposefully not mentioned any names, and I presume that's because there could be an appeal. Perhaps the judge has got it wrong. It does happen.
Yes. Now, it'd be very interesting to see if there is an appeal. A good point there, Alec. If there is an appeal, usually when people appeal, it's because they've been wronged by the judgment. The judge got this wrong, Arlo's dropped the ball, or there's something missing in the story. We're appealing. And let's wait and see. If there is an appeal, you're going to have to wait for the appeal to go through. But this judgment is damning. It's damning. And the reason I haven't mentioned names, and the names are all in here: Jeremy Ord, Stephen Nathan, Grant Bodley, Saki Masiakros, Doc Watson, Jason Goodall. I know all six of them. There's a reason I don't want to mention names. It just saddens me to have read what has happened.
Yeah. So we'll be entering quickly into the analysis. I found a really interesting report on Tech Central that actually speaks to this. It says that Dimension Data Campus sale was an illegal scheme. So it appeared that, according to him, if you listen to Rob Hersov, he said that they tried to sell the campus and some other entities. But now this report says that it was really an illegal scheme. It says that the High Court has found that former Dimension Data executives, their scheme to sell the campus of Dimension Data, the Dimension Data campus was dishonest, all right? It says Jeremy Ord and also former senior Dimension Data executives, they entered into an illegal scheme designed to benefit them personally at the expense of the company and also its Japanese parent NTT Group, according to a scathing High Court judgment handed down on Monday and seen by this report. So it said the court actually ordered that the sale of Dimension Data campus, especially in terms of the property in Johannesburg, is null and void, and it has awarded punitive costs against the former executives, who may now face further legal actions and even criminal action flowing from the judgment. All right. So what's the judgment? First of all, it says that NTT Group, which is the Japanese parent company, which owns Dimension Data, recently renamed it NTT Data, is seeking unspecified damages against these former executives. Why? It says that it also wants to give them declared delinquent directors under It also wants to have them declared delinquent directors under Section 162 of the Companies Act. All right. These executives, what are their names? He said that one of them is Jeremy Ord, who until mid-2021 served as Dimension Data's executive chairman. Rob Hersov actually mentioned this name, also names in the video. But also there's also Jason Goodall, a former Dimension Data CEO who later took the reins at NTT Limited. There's also Grant Bodley. Grant Bodley served as the Dimension Data Middle East and Africa CEO until March 2021. There's Stephen Nathan. I think this one is really close to Rob Hersov. He was Dimension Data former head of corporate finance, who resigned in mid-2021. And then there's also Saki Masiakros. I think this was a former MD of the Dimension Data Internet Solutions, who was the group of head of strategy prior to his exit, also in mid-2021. And then finally, there was Bruce Doc Watson, who was a Dimension Data stalwart, who left around the same time. So it says that the judgment against these former executives comes about 2 years after Dimension Data filed a paper at the High Court in Johannesburg against several former top executives, including former executive Jeremy Ord. And it said, and these claims were over a transaction involving the sale of its head office and the campus in Johannesburg nearly 5 years ago. It says the investigation came to NTT Limited, which is now owned by the Japanese NTT Group, and appointed international law firm Herbert Smith Freehills to conduct a forensic investigation into the allegations brought forward by a whistleblower. So the certain whistleblower actually exposed this whole scheme. And actually it said that many of whom, these former executives, many of them were actually well known in South Africa's business community. And then they've now become embroiled in this fraud scandal following a forensic probe in the December 2019 sale of the campus in a complex, it was based on a complex BEE transaction, all right? So whistleblower caught up with them and decided to whistleblow, and that's why we have this. I'm sure the Japanese are not going to go down on this one. They've actually hired It said that they appointed an international law firm, which is Herbert Smith Freehills, which is really pushing all the cables, all the pedals to make sure that this whole case comes to a justified end. So what are the findings? It said that there were damning findings. It said that in a judgment handed on Monday, the High Court not only found in favor of NTT, but also awarded punitive costs against the former executives and made several damning findings against them. He said that the High Court judge, which Rob Hersov mentioned here, Dennis Fisher, found that the executives had entered into an illegal scheme designed to appropriate for themselves a secret financial benefit, which placed them in conflict with their boards. Fisher described the scheme as brazen and dishonest and said that it was orchestrated without due regard to the relationship between the Japanese holding entity and the South African interests. All right. So now he says that the judge also found that should this kind of flouting of foundational and universal commercial values remain unchecked and unpunished, this would represent a travesty of South Africa's commitment nationally and internationally to the upholding of the values of honesty and integrity, which is so intrinsic to proper commercial relationship. And this is also in line with the criticism many ANC officials and the ANC party in general is actually undergoing a lot of criticisms about upholding honesty and integrity. And this is why Rob Hersov is really angry, because in a way it appeared that the white business community in South Africa seemed to have been that kind of like lever to kind of like claim and really push, especially in terms of court proceedings and all that, to find justice in terms of sort of like corrupt activities, sort of like coming out from ANC parties or ANC members and all that. But now most of these capitalists, especially former executives, as it were, in this company called Dimension Data, are now caught up in the same thing and really sort of like feels disappointing, because he is a capitalist proponent that really advocates for capitalism as a way out to save South Africa from the demise it is in at the moment. But anyway, it says that the former executives were lambasted by Fisher for subverting Black Economic Empowerment (BEE) legislation for their own benefit. And that's a really big problem. That's where the problem lies, because the BEE has actually been criticized by especially the business community for not allowing them to move forward or probably progress in the way they would, because the legislation has certain stipulations that actually hinders how far or how much they can operate without aligning to those requirements. But now these capitalists, these former executives of Dimension Data, seem to have played around that and used the legalities in BEE as a basis for a fraud, which has now backfired. And I think this is a really terrible incident. It said that the judge described the behavior of these white captains, that's the name she called them, white captains of industry, as of grave concern. It says that this is a cautionary tale for those who apply and regulate the BEE infrastructure, which is so vital to the development of South Africa's constitutional democracy. So in a statement emailed to, this reporter here, it says that Entity Data said that it has instructed its legal representatives to take the necessary steps to implement the judgment, all right? Now, Entity Groups takes a very strong stand against breaches, against abuses, and against ethics violations, and is pleased with the judgment that it received as regards this. So the judgment, I think the statement of the judgment actually said that in October 2022, Entity Group instituted legal proceedings to have the campus transaction declared null and void based on, among other things, the executive's failure to disclose their interest in the transaction. Now, there was also this ID Propco, which was the purchaser of the campus. ID Propco was, I think, the company that wanted to purchase the campus. It was established by Identity Property Fund 1 to purchase the company. Now, ID Propco is actually wholly owned by this fund, Identity Property Fund, all right? The report says that the fund was structured as a limited partnership, originally comprising of a black-owned general partner. Now, these executives then held beneficial majority financial interest in this fund through the fund's limited partner and major investor, Areti. Now it says that the executives, their financial interests, right, which were not disclosed to entity group, were then were held through a complicated partnership structure, which were enabled by Martin Epstein, who is a consultant to the then Dimension Data Group. Now, finally, during November 2022, it said that Areti was supposed to be the major investor in this fund called Identity Property Fund, ID Propco, all right? It says that Areti removed the general manager of the fund and replaced them with a company owned by Epstein, effectively securing complete control of and beneficial financial interest in the campus by the executives and then Epstein. So it then says that an anonymous source then told Tech Central, this report I'm reading here, that they uncovered emails that were uncovered by Herbert Smith Freehills, which is this international legal practitioner, so to speak. It's an international the international if I can get it, it's actually the international body that actually was hired by the Japanese to look into this case. So there were these emails that were uncovered by Herbert Smith Freehills that showed the implicated executive. They conspired to sell the campus to Identity Propco, which then a black women-owned firm led by businesswoman Sonia De Bruyne, at a price well below its market value. Simultaneously, the implicated executive then secured their participation in a separate but related entity that would see them profit handsomely from the undervalued sale of the campus, just like as Rob Hersov describes here. So he said, simply put, this was amounted to the defrauding of the ultimate owner of the campus, that being Dimension Data's parent company. So in other words, this South African white business capitalist, this capital business giants in South African business actually tried, or it was an attempt by them to defraud the Japanese, and especially those that own this parent company entity. But that has actually backfired, and now they are really going to be in a lot of mess. So that's actually kind of like the challenges with these ideologies. None of these ideologies are perfect. Democracy, capitalism, socialism, all of them have nooks and crannies. At the end of the day, to depend on the heart, right, and the human will, and also the greed, the ability to tame the greed that is existent and domicile in all humans, not to be able to succumb to that and defraud society and your fellow man or woman in the name of raising or trying to accrue capital. So it's greed that's actually the problem. Now that greed has caught up with this white capitalist in South Africa who, who have actually been the basis of Rob Hersov's praise for capitalism as a way out for South Africa. But now it appears that that statement might actually need to be sort of like deconstructed in another way, and we don't know where this whole case will lead. But anyway, I don't know. What do you guys think about Rob Hersov's arguments here in his speech, and hear the analysis? Share your thoughts in the comments.